Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this event. We're very happy to see those of you that have come here physically this morning, and also good morning to those of you following us online. So this event is arranged by Bergen Global, which is a CMI-UIB collaboration that I will talk a bit more about at the end of the event. And my name is Thor Olav Iversen. I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for the Study of the Sciences and Humanities at the University of Bergen, and I sometimes moderate meetings for Bergen Global. Today, we will talk about a relationship that is often framed as one of the great points of potential conflict for the future, both regional in East Asia, but also between the two superpowers of the world, the US and China on the one hand, but more specifically about the relation between Taiwan and China. I don't know too much about Taiwan or China, but fortunately, I will not be doing most of the talking today. With us online, we have Julia Marinaccio, who is actually in Taiwan and Taipei at this very moment. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Foreign Languages at the University of Bergen, and she has many years of experience devoted to Taiwan with research specifically on political ideology and relations across the strait. And here on the stage, we have Harald Bøckman, who's an emeritus researcher at the Center for Development and Environment, or SUM, at the University of Oslo. He's an expert on the political culture of China, dating back to his studies in Beijing at the Beijing University from 1976 to 1977. So we will talk on stage for about 45 minutes, and then we will open up for questions. And we take questions both here from the audience, but also from online. So if you're online and following us and have any questions, you can just post them in the chat. I wanted to start with a question about the fact that there are upcoming elections in Taiwan, local elections, and that is actually on Saturday, so in 2 days. So, Julia, what do you think is at stake in these upcoming local elections?
Yeah, you mean for Taiwan in general, for its relations with China? Okay. Well, I mean, you have to know that these are local elections. So what people are going, or whom people are going to vote for, are mayors and councillors, both at the city level, at the county level, at the township level, and at the village level. So these are very big local elections. And obviously, the main topic topics that are present or that dominate the election campaigns and news are local topics, and not like national topics in terms of security policies. Or foreign policies. So there is little talk, let's say, about China. There's more talk about relationships between, like, which party would gain foothold where, which party, which candidate would win where, and obviously contestations of public policy proposals. That said, China is always in the background, and obviously everybody in Taiwan is aware of that. China is also following these elections very closely, because they give a trend indicator for the next presidential and for the national elections that are going to happen in 2024, and also depending on the outcome of the elections for the current ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party. It is there is much at stake, because if the Democratic Progressive Party loses votes, it also means that the incumbent president will have little leeway, little room to move, and this might play into the hands of the Chinese government.
I see. Harald, you had a comment?
Yes, I think there's another aspect, more general, about the elections. It's just the fact that the elections actually take place. And this is a big thing in China. and it's scary for the Communist Party, but it's also something that attracts interest and envy, I'm sure, from lots of Chinese. So that's a part of the larger picture, I think.
Thank you. And how might an election outcome, like you said, Julia, play into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I mean, if the Kuomintang, the opposition party, regains, for example, wins the capital, wins the northern counties, which are currently like wins the current counties back and the capital back. It might be reassuring for Beijing because the KMT follows a different approach to cross-strait relations than the current ruling party DPP. The current ruling party DPP said is very more assertive when it comes to Taiwan, to protecting Taiwan as a it's, let's say, as an independent state, although not formally, and the KMT is like an independent, not a formal independent state. They cannot declare formal independence, but they are still more like they have an not so friendly approach to China, and if the KMT wins back, gets more votes, it might be an indicator that the policies and the stances of the current ruling party, the DPP, are not popular anymore, and the people want to change. This might be seen positive by China, as China sees in the KMT a counterpart with which it can communicate and with which it used to have also communication lines.
Thank you, Julia. So Harald, I know you wanted to make a comment with regards to the title of today's event.
Well, I was kind of triggered by the title, All That She Wants.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
And I'm not going to elaborate on
the reference.
That's a little too early for me, but I understood something to do with pop music. So we're in a little different field today. But actually, he not just wants to do much, but he is doing much. That's the whole thing. He's the strongest party leader since Mao, actually, because Deng Xiaoping, who kind of followed after Mao, he more or less ruled indirectly through his juniors. So what she wants to do, he wants to be a kingmaker, and he is a kingmaker. He's been there already for more than 10 years now, since 10 years at 2012. And he was also groomed from 2008 to become the next party leader. He's also a sloganeer. There are lots of slogans coming out of China from him and his speechwriters and cronies. And one of them is very much, I think, he wants to make China great again. And we know this in the West. But that's actually what he is up to. He's looking for to the US to kind of rephrase some of the slogans there. He's also an ideologist, not very convincing in my way, but he wants to be both a Marxist and a Mao for our time. He's not yet as great as Mao, the way the Chinese term it, but he is on the way to becoming that, and he very much likes to be that. He's a control freak. The way he has been handling and kind of assembling some of the loose threads and the various kind of decision-making levels in both state and party, there has never been one person since Mao, and I guess never. Mao actually didn't have that much power. He was just playing around. tossing things out and see what happened. And then he kind of came back and controlled it. But Xi is a control freak. So he has instituted some new, many new measures that somehow means that power is returning to him, or he has control of that. And because of that, he has been named by the Western press as the CEO of everything. You know, the general, was that CEO? It's the
corporate executive officer.
That's right, corporate executive. So he's running China like his own corporation, which means that China is actually in the process of really becoming a party state. I mean, this has been a kind of a label that's been used for China for the People's Republic, because it's the Communist Party that controls China. But now is really in the process of becoming a reality, because the party is running state affairs to a much larger extent than ever. So he somehow, he has given himself what you could call royal prerogatives. And we'll see what happens in the years to come, because clearly amassing so much power is also a recipe for falling down at some level or creating trouble. And then we'll see what happens.
So, Julia, how has Taiwan felt this consolidation of power and nationalist turn in mainland China in any way? Has there been sort of a change in line from the mainland during Xi Jinping's reign?
Well, I mean, so with Xi Jinping's accession to power, there have been some changes, like changes in the policy towards Taiwan, not on the general, not very revolutionary changes. So the general line, how the Chinese government in Beijing sees Taiwan and its stances have remained equal. So have remained the same. So Taiwan is an undividable part of China, and the Beijing government does not allow any formal declaration of independence, and is willing to, let's say, fight every influence that or every force that would help Taiwan to become independent. So these are lines that have remained the same. Also, the Chinese government's idea how to implement a unified China with Taiwan under the system of under the format of one system and one country and two systems. These have been macro policy stances that have remained the same. Obviously, since Xi Jinping, the attention towards Taiwan and to the question of unification has intensified. Also, efforts to on the one hand, to attract, for example, Taiwanese students to China to study, to work, because to realize their dreams their dreams literally. I quote here, in China. So this is on the one hand. On the other hand, with the DPP government, since 2016, China has also been considerably putting considerable efforts into reducing Taiwan's space on the international level. And Taiwan's action space. It has also stopped the official communication lines. This is a huge problem. But yeah, so this is
it's
general
the official communication lines in terms of diplomatic
well, they cannot they do not communicate with each other anymore. So
okay.
before they were like they talked to each other in some way. Obviously, they had diplomat. You can call them diplomatic, but also official to official communication lines, and these are closed down since 2016. And China does not want to open them again because it does not want to talk to President Tsai Ing-wen and to the DPP government. So this has changed a lot. Obviously, also. China's bearing in modernizing, like on the military level, modernizing its military, making its stances towards Taiwan much more assertive. This has been worrying a lot of like observers, both in Taiwan and on the international level.
Thank you. Now I would like to turn a bit to history. So why is Taiwan understood as this undividable part of China or the Chinese empire? Maybe you, Harald, have some reflections on that.
Oh, that goes all the way back to the Chinese part reality and part myths about China's history. I mean, one of the major classical Chinese novels, it opens and says, after a long unity, there will be a division. After a long division, there will be unity. That's the theme. And now we found ourselves in a time of division. And certainly, if you look back at China's history the last 150 years, it has been a time of division and intrusion and control. So that has been the biggest, you could say, emotional moving element, which the communists have been underpinning their policy, which is nationalism. You can take nationalism takes many forms: revolutionary nationalism, ethnic nationalism, cultural nationalism. And in China, it has differed over the years, but it's certainly, even if the Communist Party calls themselves a Communist Party today, that's more like also a way of sending a signal. For practical purposes, they're a nationalist party. And the reason why the Communist Party still has some legitimacy, I would say, is that they were the ones who kind of orchestrated that China became unified and independent again in 1949. Now, of course, it's a matter of time and how long can you live on that as your legitimation for power. But it rings strongly in the ears of the Chinese people and their hearts and minds. So the communists succeeded in unifying China with a number of pretty harsh measures, but Taiwan is the only part that is still remaining. So, because if you look a little back, in 1977, Hong Kong was returned to the motherland, as they said. In 1999, Macau, a small Portuguese colony, was returned, and now it's Taiwan is the last to go, or the one that remains. So that's why it's a matter of deep nationalistic feelings that have every reason to be like that. If you look at the way Western colonial powers treated China in the last 200 years. Just to give an example, I have a very good, or had, unfortunately died, but Chinese professor whom I cooperated with quite a lot. He was professor in history and ethnography. So he had sensitivity both to history and the ethnographic realities of China's history. And he wasn't, I'm really sorry he just passed out out of time, because this was a very, very creative relationship and very, very open and straightforward. And he said, well, I think the Tibetans, if they want to go, they can go. If you look at history, if you look at their society, I've heard very, very few Chinese saying that, because they all say Tibet is an indivisible part of China. And then he added, but Taiwan is a different affair. Taiwan is a different affair. Then there were other kind of emotional strains that kind of took over after the rational researcher. So it tells a little how deep this runs in not just as a politics, but also as an emotional issue, which means how complex, shows how complex it is.
So, Julia, how does this question as Taiwan as an indivisible part of a Chinese empire look from Taiwan?
Well, obviously, that's the point of contestation. So each side tries to tell its own story and find historical evidence to substantiate their stories. So what the Chinese government says in terms of territorial claims, that it wants to that it tries to back up with international laws is one story, and then there's the Taiwan story, where a lot of actors are trying the same to make the claim that Taiwan has never been a part, not of China, but has never been ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. So this is and prior to that, Taiwan has been always been an island under the rule of very different empires. So there were the Netherlands, there were the Portuguese. At the end of the 19th century, when China lost the war against Japan, Taiwan became a colony of Japan, and in 1945, until 1945, when Japan lost the war, the League of Nations decided to give back Taiwan to China. But at that time, China was the Republic of China, so it was not the People's Republic of China yet. It was still the Republic of China, and it was after 45 that the fight between the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party actually culminated in a real civil war that then led to the defeat of the Kuomintang, that retreated to the island and installed the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan. And it was not until the early 1990s that Taiwan too had maintained territorial claims on the Chinese mainland and wanted to reconquer for what it matters, that it had the military power or the support of other governments. That's a totally different thing, different story. But there was still this idea to conquering back the mainland. And Taiwan ended this claim, its territorial claim, relinquished its territorial claim in 1992, I think.
And that was for mainland China, like the territorial.
That was for mainland China, yes, that was for mainland China. But on the other hand, on the other side, China did not relinquish its, did not give up its claim on the territory and the society of Taiwan. So that's one thing. The other thing is with Taiwan, it is maybe from the viewpoint, it is a special case for the history of the political history between the two governments, between the Kuomintang and the CCP. But in terms of a more comprehensive view on what actually comprises China, China as a nation state. Taiwan is a part of, is as much a part of, always from the viewpoint of the Beijing government, is as much a part of China as it is, as is Tibet and Xinjiang. And the problem with these provinces, in all these provinces, in all these parts of the Chinese, let's call it empire, or like what used to be the Chinese emperor, we have movements that go against, that contest the legitimacy of the central government. And this is something that the Beijing government has to avoid in order to maintain, in order to keep the country together according to its own conception. If it loses, if it gives up Taiwan for pragmatic reasons, because I mean, nobody there are pragmatic reasons to give up the territorial claims. For example, the fact that there is a government, there is an economy, there is a functioning society having its own political system. But if it would give up Taiwan, it would also have to give up Tibet and Xinjiang, and this would lead to, according to this old conception of unity, would lead to chaos in a very, like, in the political in the political ideas of the Beijing government. So this is also a reason why Beijing will not give up Taiwan. And then, like, in addition to all geopolitical interests and that are connected to Taiwan and to the very, like, the geographical location of Taiwan.
Thank you. Harald, please.
Well, this goes a little issue of Taiwan. I think it goes a little deeper because Xinjiang and Tibet, they are strategically extremely important. But after all, that's a question of other peoples with a very distinct other cultures. You can say Taiwan, after all, they are Chinese speaking. They wouldn't say they are Chinese now. Many of them say we're Taiwanese, and that's a recent development, and which is at the bottom of the conflict today. So Taiwan is actually, you could say, objectively speaking, it's more Chinese than the other outlying areas. But the issue would be the same. I agree with what was said here, that if they let Taiwan go, then there's kind of opening up for a scenario that doesn't look very well from Beijing. We should be aware that China, the People's Republic of China, is a different makeup when it comes to state formation and constitutionally, because it's defined as a unified multinational state, or multi-ethnic, if you want to say. So it's unified. You are not allowed to secede, to walk away. But you have certain minority rights within China, real or on the paper. And this is different from the constitution of the Soviet Union, because Soviet Union was constituted as out of necessity by Lenin, as a federation, and the states had a constitutional right to secede. That's why the Baltic could secede and the others reluctantly seceded. But there's no such constitutional opening in China. So China actually, they inherited, the People's Republic inherited very much of both the borders and the mindset of the empire. They say today, as Julia said, there is a nation state, but I'd like to paraphrase Benedict Anderson, who said that China is a nation state. No, it's a state that tries to stretch the small skin of the nation state over the big body of the empire, and it explains, or it illustrates, the confrontations that China is still faced with today.
Thank you. I would just like to ask one very short thing from you, Olav. So you mentioned Kuomintang as this old nemesis of the Chinese Communist Party for the Civil War, and this is actually the same party or movement that is also standing for elections in Taiwan on Saturday, right?
Yes.
So yes. There's a continuity here, even from a certain continuity here, even from the Civil War.
Yes, there's the continuity from the Civil War, and we have the transition from a former authoritarian government, like one party state under the rule of the Kuomintang, that then helped like the transition for various reasons to a democracy where the Kuomintang became one party of many. So there are now many parties in Taiwan, but there are like for national politics there are two that are really important and that like they gain the most votes. It's the DPP and the Kuomintang. So it's right, the Kuomintang changed from like there is this continuity on Taiwan with the Kuomintang as the former, like as a party that was founded on the mainland and is now operating only in Taiwan. Like, there is still a communist party there, right? But
yeah, that's why the communists rather cooperate with the Kuomintang, because they know them. I mean, they have been waging a civil war twice, once in the 20s and one in the 40s. But still, they know each other, and they were actually not that different. I mean, Taiwan, when the nationalists came over in 1949, they continued very much of the repressive policies that were very similar to the communists. And Taiwan, the reason why there was no possibility for democracy in Taiwan was that the Kuomintang kept Taiwan under, was a martial law, is that what you call it, right? Because they were just preparing for returning to the fictional thought of returning to the mainland. So the communists certainly they would rather have the nationalists come back in power, both locally and centrally. Yes.
I would like to stick a bit to current events and ask, even also in Norway, the recent People's Congress of the Communist Party of China was covered quite a lot in the media. So Harald, what happened at this recent Congress, and what kind of a body is it?
Well, you said this in a little confusing way. It was not the People's Congress, and that's why in the press they have been mixing this up. In China, China have a party congress. The Communist Party have a party congress. But then on the state level, you have the people's, what do you call it? Suddenly escapes me. It pops up. But they have a national congress. They have a party congress of a party, and they have a national congress of the government. And what happened a few weeks ago was that the party had their, every 5th year, they have their party congress. And there they decide on the general lines. They decide who's going to fill in the various top spots in the party and in the state. And then, as has become the rule now, the following March, so you just wait until the coming March, the National People's Congress will convene. And they will somehow, in Norwegian we say that the sandpåstrøingsorgan is just they're kind of adding on the decisions that have already been made by the party congress. But actually there has been over the years, since the early 80s, there has been some real political activity within the National People's Congress, who are the so-called lawmakers. They're giving the laws. So that's why they call, this is China's parliament. But actually they do what the party congress, the following the previous fall had decided. So what's going to happen on the state level in China in the spring and in the year to come has already basically been decided. Who's going to be prime minister? Who's going to be head of state? And Xi Jinping's problem has been that he has been head of state. He's both head of the party as general secretary, and he is head of the state as president. And they like to stress in the Chinese press today, calling him a president, like in America, by the way. And then they add Xi Jinping, who's also the general secretary of the Communist Party. So it's kind of they're turning this thing around make it more palatable for the Western press. His problem was that he has been serving 2 periods of 5 years as a president, as head of state. And by a law which was passed some years ago, the period of serving as a head of state is limited to 2. That's 2 times 5 years. So in 2018, he actually moved to change, to open up that he could continue as a president in the upcoming National People's Congress. But he needed to change the constitution for that. Now, there's not the same limitations in the party statutes about how long you can serve, but there are limitations how old you can be. And there has been an established practice that if you turn 70, or if you turn 68, actually, by the time the Congress is, party Congress, then you're out. If you're 67, you can serve. His problem is that he's 69. And by the rules, he should be kicked out as a party. He's not eligible for being elected. So you're also bending the rules in that way. So it's a complex thing here because the state and the party is very intertwined. And that's why this has been creating some problems in the Western press. No wonder, because they're also themselves then bending the rules which they have been putting in place over the years after the reform period of Deng they started in the 80s actually.
I also, before we open for yes, please, Julia.
No, I just wanted to add something. So so the real power comes not in being president, but in being the general secretary, because
of the Communist Party.
Yeah. Yes, of the Communist Party. So this is a little bit. I didn't want to to disagree at the first at the beginning of the meeting, but this is where I a little bit disagree on Harald's statement that China has now become a party state. China has always been a party state because of the because of the parallel structure of party and government, and because of the way the organizational power of the Chinese Communist Party to, let's say, infiltrate state organizations, economy, and also society. It's just the amount, the extent to which it, through organizational structures, the amount to which it actually exerts power has changed over time, and there were patterns of retrenchment and openness. So there were times when the party did not exert retreated from the economy and from society. And now what we are seeing right now is a retrenchment where the party tries to control more than it had control over the past 20 during the time before Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping, there's been great discussions about why did he actually make this change in in the constitution that he could serve a 3rd term, and many, if I recall correctly, and also according to my interpretation, but please, this is my interpretation, everybody can prove me wrong, is also there's a risk inherent to having a president different from the party secretary, general party secretary, although the general party secretary has more power, because the party is always above everything else in this parallel structure. But having a president, maybe a strong president, that belongs to a different faction, kind of impedes the general secretary to maybe go for his own goals and his own missions. And now he's been both, and he continues to be both. So he doesn't have this counterweight. And what he did also at the last Congress is that he basically got rid of every counterweight possible within the Communist Party, because he got rid of every opponent who might have different ideas regarding how to organize economy, and maybe also regarding the Taiwan question. That's a good that's something I'm not so sure about. But regarding the how to organize the state and regarding how to organize the market economy, it's been very clear that he got rid of everybody who does have a different, like a more liberal market reform reformist idea. Yeah.
Yes, Harald.
Well, just to comment on the party state to clear that, I agree fully. China's always, People's Republic has always been a party state. My point is that what you see under Xi is that there is actually a physical merging between state institutions and party institutions. So the party is going more directly, hands-on, and not more indirectly through their party cells or whatever. And that's the difference. And which also means that it's becoming more like the party is running the country in a much stricter way and more efficient way, probably. You see that during the COVID, it was very much the party that came in and organized the how to cope with it. I mean, they did it their way, you could say, but they did it rather efficiently with their own methods. So that is the new thing. It's not that it's becoming a party state. So I think we agree on this.
Yes, we totally agree on that.
So before opening for questions, I would just like to touch on one more topic. So some weeks ago, the U.S. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan, and that sparked like what seemed like a very big diplomatic row between China and Taiwan, and in turn the U.S. So why did China react so strongly to the Pelosi visit?
Well, the Pelosi visit is it occurred in a context of already very strained relationship between China and the US. And China perceived the Pelosi visit as an affront and as crossing a line. And also because the Pelosi visit was kind of announced at last minute. So because Pelosi said, Ms. Pelosi said, maybe I'm going to visit Taiwan, but it was not still clear. So that's one thing. The other thing is obviously the constellation of Ms. Pelosi as the head of the Congress, being the same party of the president, was seen as something. There is obviously high level agreement on giving Taiwan more weight. There were a lot of statements also from President Biden regarding Taiwan, regarding like the U.S. intervention and non-intervention on Taiwan, and so it is in this context that Beijing reacted, but Beijing reacted to previous visits, for example, when the late President Lee Teng-hui went for a private visit to his alma mater in the US in a very similar way. But obviously, it also wanted to demonstrate this time that China of today is not China of the 1990s. So we're much more powerful. They are much more powerful now. And this is a demonstration that the Chinese government also want, like a signal to both, to the government in Taiwan, but also to the government in the US. And as a reaction to that, it issued a third, a white paper on the Taiwan question. It is the third white paper that has ever been issued. Like the first one was in 1993, the second was in the year 2000, and now after the Pelosi visit. Obviously, the paper hadn't been written in like 3 days or something, so the foundations of the paper were already there. But the decision how to deal with Pelosi's visit, so whether this military drills would be the initiation of a war that the Chinese communist government wanted to wage, was still open at that time. And the white paper made it clear that China obviously doesn't want a war. China is still but it further formalized or reiterated its stance, much more assertive than in the previous white papers and policy papers, by adding, for example, adding adjectives like Taiwan is part of China and it is unquestionable and must not be changed, or China is unswaveringly like promoting unification, something that are principles that must not be questioned, and that the Chinese Communist Party will not relinquish. And in addition to that, it further formalized the Taiwan question, not only with the white paper, because the white paper is basically a policy paper, sending signals to an international audience, but also to Taiwan. It also formalized its stance in the party constitution, and this is new. Again, not like it didn't change the policy per se, but it added this its political stance toward the Taiwan question, also in the party constitution, which is an important signal, because now it has everything. Papers, it has a law, the anti-secessionist law of 2005, and now it is also written in the party constitution. The party constitution basically is a signal, or addresses people like party members, but also people working in the government, in the party state, that these people must not question this stance and the actual goal to realize unification.
Harald, you had a comment.
Just this, the Pelosi visit and the noise around that illustrates very well the Chinese and Western perception, different perception of how to deal with the question of one China, which was then based in the 1979 agreement between President Carter and Beijing, because the Chinese version is that this is a principle of one China, and that you can't start messing around with that. Whereas the Western, and especially the American, has been, it's a matter of the politics of one China. So the principle, everybody agrees on that. Then the question is, how do you shape the politics? And the Americans and Pelosi then found that we can stretch this into allowing for a visit like that. It was the highest American official, I think, in 22 years or something.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Yes, I see.
So that's why it goes. It's a way of an American, more assertive way of practicing what you call strategic ambiguity. You know, leaving the Chinese little unaware or in the blue about how to interpret what the Americans are up to. But the Americans say, "Oh no, we're still behind the principle of one China. We just have our own politics." So this is what we're going to see more of in the future, and which is also Norway is going to be faced with or confronted with.
Thank you. And now I think we'll open up for questions. So I hope there's some questions from the audience. Anyone? Doesn't look like it. Let me just check if there's questions from online. Nope. Doesn't look. Please.
Nice. Thank you. You talked about that. The microphone. Oh, really? Sorry. Okay. Now it should be better. You talked about that the official communication line between China and Taiwan is kind of stopped right now. I thought about how is it with other communications, like trading between the countries. For example, I know Taiwan is a huge fruit producer as well for China in the past years. So how are they dealing with these?
Anyone? Julia?
Yes, so there have been trade relations. The trade relations between Taiwan and China are still very strong because China is still the largest trading partner of Taiwan. In the restrained relations, cross-strait relations, or aggravating cross-strait relations, China has issued sanctions against some, for example, fruits or other products that should harm the Taiwanese economy. I'm not an expert on that. What I heard is that some of these sanctions did not really hurt the economy, but please, this is only what I heard of. So it's not like empirical data that I collected or any analysis that I did. But I was told that it did not really hurt the economy because on the other side it would have hurt the Chinese as well. So they selected products that would not like hurt both sides too much, but that kind of was a symbolic message to what can happen. So there are, yes, trade relations between on various levels. There are a lot of still a lot of like Taiwanese businessmen or businesswomen like having their like working in China. There are still Taiwanese students in China. We do not know how many. There are no official figures, like official figures that are confirmed by the two sides. Obviously, COVID has done some damage on that too. So yes, there are still trade relations, and they are unequally affected, I would say, by changes in cross trade relations and COVID.
Thank you, Harald.
The People's Republic is still fully dependent on Taiwanese chips for their electronic industries. I think this TMC, whatever, it's these Taiwanese companies. They're the biggest in the world, including China. But from statistics I've seen, the Taiwanese investments in China have been declining since 2010. And Taiwanese are also leaving, I know, people in the electronic industry. So there's a downslide there when it comes to activities. So I would say that as of today, China is more dependent on Taiwan when it comes to the top-notch electronic devices than Taiwan is more trying to diversify.
Lovisa?
My name is Lovisa. I'm a researcher at CMI. I am curious about the reference to Taiwanese people as, Chinese speakers and, the identity of Taiwanese. Can you actually talk about that there is an identity of Taiwanese people today that is different from the Chinese, and what's that based on? And then I wonder also, what kind of impact does the tension between these two have on Chinese people living outside, for example, in the diaspora in Europe?
I think you both probably have comments for that. Perhaps you, Julia, can start.
Okay. Do we have another hour or so?
I think we have about 5 minutes.
I was
So.
going to propose that.
Yes. There's.
Oh my God, the Taiwanese identity question. It's a box of Pandora. It's a Pandora's box. So to keep it simple, there's been the share of people identifying themselves as purely Chinese has gone down to 2%, whereas the share of people identifying themselves as purely Taiwanese has gone up to 68%. The rest then identifies as both Taiwanese and Chinese. What's going on here in Taiwan is that there is and this is not now, this has been going on for several decades, but obviously with the government ruling, with a party ruling that promotes Taiwanese identity and not Chinese identity. This Taiwanese identity has been become much stronger, and also has led to frictions, to more frictions. It's always been a difficult relationship between people who also actively sustain relationships, cultural, emotional relationships with the mainland because of their ancestry, because their parents or grandparents came from the mainland. And now with the and then opposed to people who say we are real Taiwanese, and so there's a lot of it's still a big question of who what is actually the nation state or the state nation in Taiwan. Yeah, so with that I'll leave it to Harald, because otherwise I don't stop.
No, I agree with you, and I'll try just to limit myself to it. It can be simplified to two categories, and that's not the reality. Reality is much more interesting than that. But you have what the Chinese call the 外省人. That's those who came from outside the province. That means at the time Taiwan was a Chinese province for a short period. And whereas the majority is 本省人, they are the people of this province, and that's basically all kinds of different Taiwanese. And within that, you have lots of very interesting historical experiences and a question of identity, which eventually finally ends up with the question of, is Taiwan, what are the criteria for Taiwan as an independent state? Whereas identity is, of course, a very interesting, but still rather complicated issue. So there's more to that. We need more than 1 hour. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, please.
Are we on the brink of war? Are we going to see Xi get what she wants? Or is it buck, no bite?
What was that? Buck, no bite?
Bark, no bite.
Oh, bark, no bite. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, great question.
The elephant in the room.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, there are different interpretations, but so for my interpretation, or the where I the stream of thought that I adhere to is, so there is no official timeline for unification. There is no the main premise that the Chinese government wants to have a peaceful unification has not changed. There are several pragmatic factors that might dissuade or keep the current leadership from actually waging a war. Is like the preparedness of the military. It's still the modernization of the PLA is ongoing, but it's still not there where it should be. It hasn't combated for 50 years, 40 years. The instability that would create a war in the region and also the uncertainty of the reaction of other countries. President Biden has been quite clear that in the case of an invasion, the U.S. would fight with Taiwan, but neither Taiwan, not even Taiwanese, really trust in this statement, because things can change. That's nothing like really written down, and the fact that the U.S. citizens don't want a war, like the government to wage another war, would also have an effect on the decisions on how to support Taiwan in case of a war. And yeah, so these are all factors that I think speak against the war, at least for the time being, unless a really red line is crossed. But the problem is the red line is defined by the Chinese government. And one real red line would be the declaration of Taiwan's declaration of independence. But and another red line is definitely the U.S. changing its one China policy, and changing its changing its diplomatic relations from China to Taiwan. That would definitely be a red line. But what we don't know is, for example, what if European countries would change their one China policy? Is this then also a red line? It obviously depends on the countries, and this is the insecure factor. So unless people everywhere keep calm, I think there is we can be optimistic that there will be a kind of de-escalation, or not, at least not it will not come to an escalation.
Harald, do you have a short finishing comment?
Yeah, it seems to be the ones who are most relaxed about it is the population in Taiwan, from reports that they're used to this. But of course, there's a question of the red lines, which Julia talks about, because this was very much in the forefront in the last meeting with Xi and Biden. Xi was talking very much about red lines, and Xi would never, or no Chinese communist leader would ever go down in history as the one who lost Taiwan. So that's the ultimate red line for Xi.
Then I think our time is up. Thank you very much to both of you, Julia and Harald. I thought that this was very enlightening and interesting. If you want to follow future Bergen Global events, which are similar to this one, you can follow Bergen Global on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And on our webpage, you can also subscribe to our newsletter. So yes, again, thank you very much.